So the question I want to discuss with you is whether fairness by unawareness is actually fair or not. So what does it actually mean to be fair? We have, of course, already talked about this, but what we learned in another project with lawyers is that they have a very procedural perspective. So they say that a process or a decision is fair if the decision itself is not based on legally protected attributes. And this is sometimes called fairness by unawareness. And the idea is if there is no photo on the CV and you might not know the age, the gender of a person, how can you possibly discriminate, right? So I want to lay open two claims against this idea of fairness by unawareness. The first claim that I make is that using a discriminating decision-making system can be more fair than using a fair one. And the second one is using protected attributes might actually result in fairer decisions. And this talk is based on a cooperation with Hannah Hoffmann and Verena Vogt from the University of Münster and with Mark Hauer from my own group, and he will later lead the discussion. So what is an algorithmic decision-making system? I want to keep it very simple. It's an algorithm, and we are interested in those algorithms that take as an input a set of people and either score them or categorize them, classify them into classes. So the question, of course, is where does the algorithm come from? And on the one hand, we have so-called expert systems. This is a technology that comes from the 80s and 90s. That means you have coded decision rules summarizing experts' decision processes. Normally, these kind of algorithms are easily inspectable. So you have an idea on what the process is, and you could rather easily judge whether there's a discriminatory aspect to it. But of course, today we're talking about learned decision rules. So these are those that are abstracted from data and human decisions of the past. And I want to give you a simple example for learned decision rules from the so-called AMAS classification system for the unemployed. This case is based on a very detailed report by the developing statisticians, that is Holl, Kernbeis, and Wagner-Pinter. And I actually think it is a blueprint on how you can be transparent about an AI system that makes decisions. So the idea behind this classification system for the unemployed is that the Arbeitsmarktservice in Austria wanted to identify those people that have the most need for further support, for example, additional training or education. So they thought we need to identify those that will find a job anyway because they don't need any further support. And we shouldn't try to help those that will not find a job anyway. We should leave them at peace and maybe also relieve the restrictions on them so they don't have to apply for jobs anymore, but they won't also get a support into that direction to get back into the job market. So the data the model is recalculated every year, and it's always based on the last 4 years. And the technical report is about one of these iterations, and it was based on 850,000 cases from the last 4 years. And for each of these persons, of these unemployed persons that came to the Arbeitsmarktservice and wanted to get help, they knew a lot of things of course. The features were very carefully selected. So the data scientists tried to identify those properties that would really be causal to the question of whether people can get easily back into the job market or have a hard time getting back. On the other hand, if you only have 850,000 cases, which already is a lot, however, you cannot have a high number of so-called features or properties that you work with, because otherwise your groups, so people that have the exact same characteristic with respect to the chosen properties, will be statistically too small to say anything about their prospects on the job market. So they had to make a balance between the two things. So let me give you an overview of the selected features. For example, it was a characterization of the kind of unemployment and the number of times they were unemployed in the last years. This resulted in 50 different groups or flavors or values of this characterization. They looked for nationality, so whether it was an Austrian, a European citizen, or neither nor. They had selected as a feature whether a person is a caregiver. They also looked at education, but they grouped all people in only 3 classes. So either you just have the minimum that you need to do in Austria, so the minimum number of years in school, or you have a formal training, or you are an academic. They also looked at age and built 3 groups out of that, and they selected gender. All in all, they have about 12 different features, and in total, it can be 60 to 70 different ways that make up my whole profile. And with that, they trained a statistical model. So what is the model? And I think Christian just made it very clear. As data scientists, we have a lot of freedom to make design decisions, and that is such a design decision, which model you take and to which model you fit the data to. So in this case, they took something that is called a logistic regression, and actually they trained 2 models, one to understand whether a person is very likely to be easily employable, and another model to understand whether a person is very unlikely to be employed in the next few years. And in principle, this always looks like this. So don't be scared, it's easily explained. So here you have one variable, and how this comes into being, I will explain you in a second. And here you see what the machine thinks about this value here on the x-axis. So if you have a negative value on the x-axis, you will, as a result, get a 0, which might mean this person is not easily employable. And if you have a high value on that x-axis, the result of the formula will be a 1, and that means the machine thinks you are rather easily employable. So how do we come at this? How do we arrive at this x-axis value? So in the formula, each of these features is one part of the input, and it is weighted. So in essence, the formula for this x value is something like this, a weighted sum. You have a first weight for the first feature, a second weight for the second feature, and so on for all of the features that we have. And then the machine tries to find out what these weights are. And it does so by learning them. So what does learning mean here? For each data point from the past, we know the person's category, whether they were easily employable, not employable at all, or anything in between. So the weights of each feature are now heuristically, and I will explain this word in a second because it's very important. They are heuristically changed, and we try to optimize the weights such that most employable persons receive a high value by the formula, and most unemployable persons to get a low value. So what is a heuristic? We talk about algorithms a lot. However, algorithms have a very special meaning in computer science. It means that you get a guarantee that the algorithm will find the best solution. A heuristics is a procedure that does not guarantee a perfect result. And I have brought you as a visualization a labyrinth. So of course, if you are stuck in a labyrinth, you would like to find the shortest path out of it. But a simple heuristic will guarantee you that you get out of it, but it might not be on the shortest path. So what is the heuristics? You take your right hand and you always follow the walls on your right hand. And either you come back at a point where you've already been, then you change to the other wall and then you follow that one, or you will come to the exit. So this is a procedure that guarantees you that you will get out, but it cannot give any guarantees on whether it's the shortest path by which you leave the system. And actually, in machine learning, almost every single procedure is just a heuristics. So in that case, it means the weights in this formula are estimated by a heuristic. They might be very good, so they might very well fit the data so that it is easy to understand who's employable in the future and who's not. But you don't have a guarantee on how good the model is. So you see that here there are already a lot of design decisions. I'm not so sure that we can find out what the consequences for all of them will be. So designability is certainly a problem, but at least everyone should know that it's heuristics, that there are a lot of knobs and parameters, and of course they need to be laid open if we have an application in which we really care about the quality of the result. So coming back to this model, what does it mean? It means that in this weighted sum, if our heuristics decides that some of the feature gets the positive weight, it means that the result of the decision will rather turn to, yes, this is an employable person, while if the weight that is found by the heuristics is negative, then the machine will rather tend to decide that this is not an easily employable person. So actually the statisticians were very open about one of their models to make the public understand how it works, and it backfired. So we need to talk about transparency and backfiring effects, because I actually think that this technical report is really a masterpiece of transparency. But boy, did these data scientists have a shitstorm to sail through. Why? Because it assigns negative weights to women, to persons over 50, and to caregivers. And so that what we see is, of course, that the system is certainly aware of protected attributes, and people were really, really angry about it because they thought that the system is biased. So can its usage be fair? What is your opinion? Actually, we have on the reactions button you see in Zoom below, you can give me a yes or no whether you think that such a discriminating system, whether you think that its usage can be fair or not. Joanna, can you give me a yes or no to see whether people are actually using that? So it seems I cannot see your answers, but you might have made a decision for yourself. So, and also this is something that Christian already hinted at. We cannot judge the system by itself. We need to understand